Okay, this is the Google Hangout 2, and we have Randy, Todd, Kenneth, and Stephanie. And we're just going to start with question 1. Okay, so keeping in mind that policymakers tend to support known policy preferences, what factors allow intelligence to remain objective? We'll start with that.
Okay.
Go from there.
Basically, what I gathered was that in order for an analyst to remain objective in his or her research and intel gathered, they can't reflect any of their own opinions or the agenda that the decision maker is pushing in the information that they're gathering. And I guess one of the ways or one of the factors that I found was that an analyst can remain objective by gathering fact-based research and intelligence, and that by sticking with the facts and not assuming things are as such, an analyst will provide information that is free of speculations based on their personal bias.
How do you think that plays into it, though? Because most of what analysts find is speculation.
Yeah.
So is it feasible to achieve objectivity?
Yeah, I mean, as far as objectivity being feasible, I feel like as a majority of the intelligence community, yes, it is feasible using fact-driven research methods. Although objectivity can be hard when the information is gathered, when the information that is gathered is not exactly what the decision makers have in mind as far as their agenda goes. But there's always like what I kind of gathered was it's always going to be a back and forth as long as the two continue to butt heads, as far as what the agenda calls for and what the intel community is bringing in. So,
how do you feel about it, Randy, Todd?
This kind of plays into one of my questions at the bottom, because talking about the remaining objective, well, in one of the later questions, it discusses how policymakers tend to only choose the intelligence that supports with their agenda. So how do you remain objective when you are still supporting agenda?
Yeah. So that's kind of what I found too. But one of the quotes that I got from Lowenthal was that he goes on to say that if intelligence is not objective, then the timeliness, digestibility, and clarity of the information gathered doesn't even matter at that point if it's not objective. So he kind of stresses the objectivity of the analyst. But
I felt like he did that too, but then at the same time, I also felt like he maybe thought it wasn't obtainable because he talks so much about how the policymaker won't listen if it's not on their agenda.
Right. And see, but
that's the problem. I guess that's what we face.
Yeah, and another thing that I kind of gathered was that like good intelligence state, that's objective, will actually point out the flaws in the agenda that the decision maker is wanting to. So I mean, in that way, it kind of challenges decision makers in another kind of aspect.
So about the Benghazi example.
Benghazi, what I got on that is basically that. Kind of a summary. Within hours of September 11th, 2012 attack on the U.S. consulate on the Benghazi in Libya, intelligence indicated that the assault was an attack of Islamist jihadi terrorism, which is members of the Libyan Al-Qaeda franchise. And this information was gathered by the CIA and DOD and passed to the decision makers, hours before the attack. And obviously, nothing was acted upon. But then afterwards, I find it kind of strange that there was a stark contrast in how the attacks were described in the talking points of the top administration officials, including Obama and stuff like that, where basically the information that they said they had, they had a lot more than they were portraying to the community. So basically that. This is just a short example of how good information was provided to the decision maker prior to the attacks, but afterwards, I guess it wasn't in the policymakers' agenda to directly say that this was an Islamist jihadi thing attached to Al Qaeda, and so I guess it wasn't really focused much on, because at that point that's not what the agenda was.
Right.
So it just goes back to what we were talking about.
Yeah.
That's kind of all I gathered on the Benghazi.
Yeah. Okay, good. Does anybody have anything to add to that? Have you guys ever read the book 13 Hours or seen the movie?
I seen the movie, yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, I heard the movie was pretty accurate.
Yeah, the book is really good. It tells a lot about intelligence and how that whole deal, like you said, how the lapse in policy and agenda failed. Okay, so discuss what types of policy intelligence issues might be triggered at different steps of the intelligence cycle, and do you believe that specific behaviors of policymakers affect the intelligence process, and how?
Okay. What I got on this was, to start, Lowenthal goes pretty in depth to start about the relationship between the policymakers and intelligence community. And actually, he kind of refers to the policymakers as consumers, clients, or customers. And basically, the intel community goes by providers. So in that aspect, the relationship between the consumers and the providers is basically, obviously, intelligence community is providing the intel to the decision makers. Decision makers are then taking that intel and making a decision. But the client and consumer both suggest that there's somewhat kind of an economic relationship with the provider of the service or commodity, with varying degrees of evolution on the part of the client and customer, which he gives an example is kind of like someone with a serious injury has little choice but to go to a doctor, whereas a decision of cosmetic surgery is more evolutional in that aspect. And he kind of says that the relationship between the two is solely evolutional. So one of the main differences that I saw was that like we talked about earlier, policymakers have their own agendas that they would like to push. And he gives the James Baker example, where he was clear upon taking office that he was not going to spend a lot of time in the Middle East. Not that that wasn't an important region, but their agenda just indicates what they want to focus on. As far as the intel community goes, you can't simply focus on one region and forget about others. Therefore, the first problem that I found lies when the intelligence community finds valuable information in a region that's not on the agenda of the policymaker. So that was kind of one of my questions is, okay, well, what do you do at that point? You know what I mean?
Right.
It kind of goes back to the Benghazi deal, where you got the intel, but it's not what your person above you wants to hear. So
I found it interesting that he said that the relationship is more like a consumer relationship too, not only for the example that he gave, but also for the fact that when you're a consumer, you can take in or buy as much of the information as you want to, and you can do away with the rest of it. And I think that's kind of what they do. They take in everything that they want to hear, and then they just do away with the rest of it.
yeah. One of the second, because I kind of highlighted two, problems, I guess, in the relationship. He goes on to talk about the collection process, and that's the next area of disarray between the policymakers and the intel community. In a basic sense, the intel community is constantly trying to innovate their technologies in intel collection, which is referred to as the backbone of intel. But the problem lies in that these innovations cost a lot of money, that the policymakers are constantly trying to manage the importance of the resources that the intelligence community need to collect the assets. And not a lot of times they're not receiving that budget that they need to buy the tools to gather. So, I personally feel as though that the actions of the policymakers directly affect the Intel community process due to the fact that these policymakers can't control the budgets and the agendas that specifically affect the gathering process and the areas of focus on the Intel community that they're even allowed to have. So I feel like they play a big part in the intelligence.
Do you think that as far as like the budget and stuff goes, when they reformed the intelligence community, that helped any at all? Because they gave more power to the DNI for making those types of decisions. I know that's a question later on, but
yeah, and that definitely helped. Something needed to be done because I don't feel like one. I mean, obviously the policymakers are the end all be all, but
yeah,
the reform needed to happen. I feel like.
Right. I think maybe too if the policymaker kind of I think in the book it says something about a lot of the policymakers didn't come from the intelligence community, so it's hard for them to like kind of gauge the processes that the intelligence community uses. Maybe if I know that they can't really recruit people who have been in the intelligence community.
No, but there needs to be some sort of mediator though.
Yeah, if they had a better understanding of how things work in that way, but a lot of times I guess some of them don't care to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything to add to that?
I was looking on page 292 in the intelligence book, and just to add on to what you guys are saying about policymakers and their limits of intelligence, there's a box, and it talks about, during Katrina, the intelligence was I think Lowenthal described it as nearly perfect. They had known days before the storm hit, and people, they reacted late. The reaction to it was late, and so this unprepared population of people, received a wrath that was just unbelievable with the amount of water and the Category 5 hitting New Orleans area. And I guess the main thing in reading that was the last sentence. It says, the lesson is that even perfect intelligence is useless unless someone acts on it. So I think it's just kind of going to what was being said on agendas and everything like that. So kind of what I got.
I liked that example too, and I think that in the case of Katrina, Mayor Nagin had like a lot of information as well. But to me, I feel that in that case, it wasn't only the policymaker. I mean, it was late when he told everybody to leave and stuff like that, but at the same time, they didn't leave either. So I think that it takes more than just the policymaker and the intelligence community. It's kind of like an umbrella deal where it has to involve everyone.
Right.
This question falls in line with almost all of my questions. So this whole week is, we're bouncing off of, we're reaching into everybody else's questions and topics, because, talking about the DNI, I had to do a little bit more research because I don't have that much experience or education in what the DNI did. And so it led me down quite a few little rabbit trails. But the whole idea is intelligence in the midst of, right information to the right people. And what happens when the agenda and the policymakers don't line up with that?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so in a quest for transparency, there's often the push and pull with intelligence analysts protecting sources and methods and policymakers opting for declassification. Do you believe that the policymakers should have the ultimate say, and do you agree with Lowenthal that policymakers do not need analysts as much do not need analysts as much as analysts need policymakers.
Okay. Kind of to start, I believe that the sources and methods for gathering this sensitive information should remain classified. But by doing this, you not only protect the assets you gathered during the intel process, but you protect the intel officer who had to go through who knows what to obtain that asset in the first place. But I really don't agree with Lowenthal that policymakers don't wait a second. I do not agree that Lowenthal that policymakers don't need analysts. At that point, it's like, okay, well then who's going to provide the policymakers with all the information regarding these attacks? And so, another question I pose is like, how will the policymakers know what's coming if there's no intel to tell them what they're seeing in as far as the transactions and different things going on? So the relationship needs to be a give and take relationship in that aspect in order for the two sides to achieve the same ultimate goal, which is national security. So by saying that is policymakers should lean on the intel officers for the information needed to make a decision, and intel officers should lean on the policymakers to not only act on the assets, but back them up with whatever they needed to do to obtain that asset to begin with. And that goes along with the budget and the and not putting all their business out there as far as how they got it, or putting their assets out there to begin with. But I kind of and it mentions the Donald Trump thing with the Russian probe and all that stuff. When it comes to my thoughts on that, I feel as though I can kind of see both sides on this one. On Trump's side, I can see how he would want everyone. He wants to let everyone basically know that the intel that we've got on Russia isn't biased, and it doesn't just play to what everyone thinks that it does. And so in that aspect, he wants everyone to see it by declassifying. He wants everyone to see exactly for themselves that it's not biased. But on the other hand, like I was saying, I stand true to the beliefs that the decision makers should not be able to declassify crucial information and how that information was gathered. But like part of the war against other regions is like not knowing what each other has on you. You know what I mean? So like that's part of the battle there. And if we're just giving it to them exactly what we've got, then what is there left to wonder? As far as their aim goes.
Okay.
So kind of all I had for that one.
What do you guys think about that? And as far as the declassification of like intel goes, anybody?
I agree with Kenneth that about the disagreeing with Lowenthal about policymakers and analysts, because the staff for the analysts for intelligence has drastically increased with each additional administration. How on earth can these how can policymakers do the job of the last, I think Obama's administration was 400 for intelligence, and how do you gather that much information and get the correct information to the right people if we don't have those analysts? Who's going to do that job objectively, tying it back into before?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree too. I think that sometimes the intelligence community maybe gets overlooked in a way, but their job is pretty important, especially to the policymaker. And I think sometimes even the policymaker thinks maybe they don't need the analysts as much as they do, or maybe they do know they need them, but they are just kind of taken for granted in a way. If you ask the policymaker, I'm sure they won't say, oh yeah, we definitely need them more than they need us, or,
Right.
As far as the classification thing goes, I agree with Kenneth on the side that I don't think that the public needs to know everything that goes on. Half the public doesn't really care.
No.
And so really what we're doing by declassifying those documents is putting ourselves at risk because like you said, then we're just letting go of all of our secrets and the way that we do things, you know?
Right.
I mean, everybody already knows that Russia's a threat and everyone's going to think what they want to. If somebody thinks it's biased, then they're going to continue to think it's biased regardless of how much information you show them, you know what I mean? People pretty much already have their mind made up. And I think that it's good for transparency and everything, but I just don't think that it's necessary.
No, I don't either.
I agree because it could get in the wrong hands. You know, hacker or anybody like that, or somebody who's linked to somebody else, and
exactly. That's what I mean. Like, you know, the everyday people, they don't really care. You know, they're not going to go through 8 chapters of unclassified documents. It's the people who want the information who we don't want to have it. You know what I mean? Yeah, like you said, it gets in the wrong hands, and that's the wrong hands are probably more concerned with it than the general public.
Yeah, but I mean, like you're saying, I really don't think they care as long as they stay safe and they know that everything's fine.
Right.
Well, Trump's play was with declassifying. It's strategic and for other reasons. Yes, it happened, but there are other aspects behind why he did it, especially for the Russian probe. I mean, without getting political, Trump is not a politician.
Right.
He's not. He is a businessman. So he thinks in terms of business, not politics. So could that be dangerous for national security?
Absolutely.
Yes, but he does have a huge group of people behind him say, oh, no, you really can't do that. Right. So this is where our checks and balances system comes. It's going to be beneficial, but there's another reason behind why it happened that we probably won't ever know or understand the full scope of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely some behind the scenes stuff that we probably will never know.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the next question. So discuss the 7 recommendations for the intelligence reform put forth by Treverton and ways in which they attempted to fill the shortcomings evidenced by the 9/11 Commission and the subsequent Iraq weapons of mass destruction intelligence failures. Have any of these reforms assisted with removing collection disciplines, stovepiping, and if so, which ones and how specifically?
All right, I guess I'll start there since it's kind of my portion. And what I'll do is I'll just talk about each one and then give the recommendations instead of just naming them and then going back. So the first one was to create a director of national intelligence. And Treverton talks about the idea or the logic here was to give the DNI what position the DCI lacked authority over budgets for intelligence agencies other than the CIA, over hiring and firing senior leaders, over setting standards for intelligence, personnel, and infrastructure. It also goes on to say the 9/11 Commission, they proposed to embody interagency cooperation by giving the DNI 3 deputies, each of whom would have to have a second agency responsibility, such as foreign intelligence, i.e. the head of CIA, defense intelligence, the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, and Homeland Intelligence, the FBI's EAD for Intelligence, or Undersecretary of Homeland Security for Information Analysis and Protection. They also recommended under this first recommendation that the DNI be located in the executive office of the president. However, the bill that was the 2004 bill cut that out and said, no, we won't have it here. So the second recommendation was to create a NCTC, which is the National Counterterrorism Center, and basically it's Trevorton talked about the terrorist threat integration system. It's called TTIC, and basically prior to it changing, it was to absorb analytic talent then residing in the CIA's CTC, the FBI's CTD, and the DIA's Joint Task Force. So basically, they were trying to come up and connect the dots of intelligence, but they wanted to use like a unified approach. So get some of the best people and create this joint operation kind of deal that would help with planning and getting all this intelligence together. And one of the main focuses with connecting the dots was terroristic threats to Homeland Security. So that was, and obviously with counterterrorism. All right. The next recommendation was to create national intelligence centers, and it's exactly some of what I've explained in the last one. Is they want unified commands. As far as bringing together analysts and these operation specialists, to help. And so the 911 Commission's proposal was to make these liaisons the primary way, and the intelligence center is the primary way that intelligence community does its work. So they want to have like a liaison between, a link between, so that they can share their information. All right, we'll move on to the next recommendation is to make the DCI separate from the DNI. And in the vision of the 9/11 Commission, was more or less incorporated in the final bill. And the DCI was to be primarily responsible for building a better espionage capacity for the nation. But the commission recognized, Trevorton talks about how the commission recognized that and argued that the risks of, I can't talk this morning. The 911 Commission, the 9/11 Commission recognized that risk, but they argued that the clandestine operations are tactical and they require close attention. So that was an issue. And then it talked about how DCI directly briefing the president. I'm sorry. One of the visions of the 9/11 Commission, they hope that a DNI would be able to exercise the third-party responsibility while actually managing the second. And the last recommendation was do not create a separate domestic intelligence agency. Recommended creating not just a domestic intelligence or DI within the FBI, but also a national NSB, incorporating intelligence plus the FBI's CTD and the CD. And so basically what I got from all of this was the 9/11 Commission really wanted to have a central intelligence overall. Just kind of reading all these recommendations. Second part of the question, I'll go back.
Do you think that assisted with removing collection stovepiping?
Right. I'm sorry. And when I looked at it, I read just prior to all these recommendations, and it goes into stovepiping, and breaking down the stovepipes. And I'll have to disagree. And just say that as far as, it made separate agencies opposite of what the 9/11 Commission wanted. So it was kind of opposite, going in the opposite direction. And I kind of feel on the side of the 9/11 Commission that we need to have more of a centralized information sharing centers. Like, if I have some information, I need to be able to send it or get it to whoever needs it and can use it to help with whatever it is we're addressing, counterterrorism or any threats to our nation or the homeland. So
right. I think that's what they were trying to achieve, but I don't think it's been achieved quite yet.
Yeah. The way I kind of felt out of the reforms that you kind of mentioned, I feel like if any of them were to prevent the stovepiping, I feel like it'd be the one that you described with the liaison. Solely because the liaison would, like you said, further push that information through, and kind of explain the information gathered on this side in order for the other side to kind of better understand and push that asset. So as far as the reforms you talked about, I think the liaison is the one that prevents the stovepiping.
Do you guys think that with the reforms and everything, if I don't know if you guys read about it, I'm sure you did, how 9/11, how I guess the lapse in information led to the 9/11, how they slipped through the cracks, kind of. Do you think that with the new layout of things that could happen again, or we've kind of prevented that from happening?
I don't think anything's not possible. I just think with 9/11, we were totally caught on even though we had the information, we didn't expect anything of that magnitude to happen. However, I think we would probably be on top of things as a result of 9/11 and with the other attacks.
I found it kind of crazy. They were kind of just like hiding in plain sight, and it just had to do with the information. I mean, nobody could really let the information go.
But they're not guilty until they actually commit the crime.
Right.
The crime that they committed prior to 9/11 was the plotting and the planning. But even then, how do you how do you prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt in a court? And still, I mean, they were quote unquote upstanding citizens, except for what, 2 or 3 of them, which they knew. Wait, what? He swear? So
Yeah.
information is great unless it goes nowhere. I mean, we talked about it in our last hangout. The kid that was the shooter in Florida at the school, he didn't do anything wrong until he went and shot at school, even though he was on all of these watch lists. Well, you can't prevent it because you don't know specifics. I think that we've gotten significantly better in being able to stop things from happening, because there are things that happen all the time that the public knows nothing about. I'm in InfraGard. Have y'all heard of that? It's a link between the private and public sector, and for critical infrastructure. And I get through the FBI. So the FBI will send me alerts of different threats that they're seeing in our area that never touch the news. And I can't even share the information unless the other person has the same clearance that I do.
Wow.
Like, it's steep, and it's school districts, it's the port, it's big major infrastructure for us.
Kind of a side note too. I know this is not related to the question. Have you guys watched Jack Ryan on Amazon?
Oh, but I want to.
Series?
No, I plan on it though.
Okay. While I was watching this, I was like, man, this is so crazy that we're taking this class and I'm watching the show, because everything that we're seeing in this class is like, he's an analyst. He's got this high level target that he's trying to push, but initially the decision makers are hard to push it until, I'm not going to spoil everything, until finally, he's right in the fact that they're comparing the guy that he was looking at as the next Bin Laden, or at least, in the show. I don't know. It's just kind of crazy to see, because he gathered the information and exactly like what we're studying. It's kind of cool. Y'all should watch it. Anyways.
I agree with what you're saying, Randy, of how they are not guilty until we can prove they're guilty. But at the same time, I just feel like they needed to, like the tip-off list, they weren't showing up on all of the lists that they needed to show up on. So while they were on one watch list, they were on the other watch list. So not everybody could keep an eye on them. And I think that's where we lapsed. I don't know.
No, I completely agree with you. Who's going to connect the dots between agencies? Exactly. And that's been a problem, and that's the attempt of what's happening with the DNI. So what good is the intelligence if we cannot action on it?
Right. Yeah, yeah. And another thing, does anybody else have to refer back to the content, to the table of contents all the time for all these abbreviations?
Yes, the acronyms kill me.
I'm like, what is all this?
Write them out.
Yeah,
it's really bad. Well, it's really bad in Trevorton. It's like every paragraph there's a analogy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the next question. Assess the trilogy experiment by the FBI and illuminate on challenges facing the IC in the area of technology. Do you think that the marketplace concept for intelligence processes in the U.S. could alleviate some of the technological challenges?
All right. I guess I'll define what the trilogy is first. And basically, it was the FBI's information technology upgrade project that was divided into 3 parts, hence why it's trilogy. And it was the project was centered around upgrading the agency's 56 offices, field officers, and 22,000 agents, and the support staff with desktop servers, web enabling, investigative database systems, and they mentioned a virtual case file. And it would, I guess the system would automate the antiquated paper-based automated case support system. Wow, those are but the challenges I found, the 4 challenges in reading this, was that the FBI failed as a matter of its highest priority in crafting an enterprise architecture to define a strategic view of its goals, missions, and needs that could be linked through information technology to its operations and processes. So basically, they could not determine how such investments could be tied into its operational objectives. So they would fall short of what's required or what's needed in that aspect. The second challenge was there was a limited rollout. Initial rollout would provide an early warning for potential problems. The committee expressed its concern that the rapid development approach and compressed project schedule presumes success at every stage and did not give adequate consideration to testing. A major weakness included the third challenge was that a major weakness included the lack of unsurveyed prototypes in its applications development processes. Even the most experienced IT professionals cannot anticipate all the functional requirements and specifications. So, internal and contracted developers should make use of extensive prototyping and usability testing with real users. And the last challenge was they point out that the FBI does not have adequate human resource and skill base needed to deal with the FBI's modernization project. For example, they pointed out that the FBI had extreme shortage of experienced project managers, contract managers, and senior IT managers who possessed good communication skills. So they hired highly qualified IT professionals, but they hired them without requiring to make excessive financial sacrifices and to borrow personnel from other agencies and even from the private sector. So that was my challenges as far as.
Can I stop you right there? So I know this isn't part of the question, but I'm curious to know what you guys think. So do you think that's been fixed? The shortage and the gap in what the FBI has to do and what kind of resources they have?
I would doubt it. Just because I feel like they're always harping on the budget, and it's like when it comes to prioritizing the budget, I feel like, yeah, this is important that they need people who can actually understand the system in which they've written. But I find it really hard to believe that they're going to hire IT professionals to understand a program that they wrote when there's more important aspects that need to be taken care of.
Yeah. The only reason why I ask is because that's kind of a problem that we're having at work right now. They're kind of trying to figure out. There's a gap. There's a lot of people our age that want to do Homeland Security, but then so there's older people who are all about to retire, and then there's people who just got there. But at this, the gap in knowledge, the older people are leaving faster than they can hire the younger people. So when we come in, we don't have any real knowledge or anybody to go to for the knowledge.
Right.
We're just trying to figure that out. So I just wanted to ask what you guys thought about that.
See, we're seeing that too in the Houston Police Department. That's where I work, and we're seeing that because They're starting to take away some of the old guys' benefits. So these guys are, you know, massive.
They don't even give notice. I mean, they just leave. You know, they're just there one day and then they're like, okay, I'm retiring Friday. What?
And the next thing you know, it's like we don't have the people coming in to replace the massive people leaving. And like that to me is like, you know, for us kind of scary because, you know, you don't have those guys to lean on, and it really kind of forces you to kind of learn it yourself. And relating it to this, you can't exactly just learn a database like what Todd described on the go. You need somebody there to explain to you how it works, and it's just not there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that was I don't think that issue is centered just to the trilogy problem. I think it's just a problem overall, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, oh, go ahead, Todd. Sorry. I was gonna just add on to Kenneth. You're absolutely right, because as your senior leadership is advancing through, you're losing, I mean, information, street information, people information. There are relationships that are built, and without a strong crossover or introduction for newbies, all of that is going to be lost, which could save lives. And I mean, let's take it back to the video we watched about the in the UK, the bombing in UK, and how it was the woman then that was able to, it was a newbie interpreter that was in there, but it was an older lady that was coming to them with information. So, so in one sense, it's very beneficial for new blood to get in, mix things up, but it's also, you're losing information, you're losing relationships without taking the time to really teach them how to go. I mean, Kenneth, when you were being trained, how much of the information was taught in a book versus on the streets?
Right. And
I know, like, what's crazy is in when you take into account, you know, I'm sure you guys have a certain need to know, and then we have a certain need to know. Well, a lot of the stuff that we deal with is classified stuff, so no one writes it down. I mean, you can't write it down, and you can't find it. If it's gone, it's gone. You know what I mean?
right.
And like
we
you said,
that same problem in the Dallas Police Department. We have it, I think, worse because we're not just losing the top personnel, the people who've been there for 20, 25 years. We're also losing it from the bottom. So there's people who are in my realm that have, you know, 8 to 10 or 15 years, and we're still trying to figure it out and figure out best ways and policies, but we're not getting anything from the top down because of our pension issues and pay issues. It's just like you said, our guys are leaving, Kenneth. Our guys are leaving. Our older guys are leaving as fast as they can. So are the younger guys because they're finding jobs in the feds. The feds come and it's unbelievable. I've been asked to go to ICE 3 or 4 times now. I mean, they just recruit, and then or some of our guys will get some of these special assignments in ICE or wherever they're going to go. They'll totally leave the department. So they're not going to give back. They're going to dedicate their time to their new job now, and we lose that. So.
Right.
To kind of get back to the question and kind of tie it in with this, so do you feel like even though these older guys who have all of this knowledge and everything, do you think that over the course of their career they kind of become, I know we just talked about how valuable they are based on relationship and street knowledge, but like with the technological advances, do you think that they lose some of their like value because they don't really, I guess the way that they've done things in the past doesn't tie into new technologies?
I think it's dependent on the person. I think it's case to case basis. Because I feel like you'll have some guys who'll address it and embrace it. and embrace the change because they understand or they can see big picture. But I also think you do have some of those guys who say, screw it, this is the way I've done it. I'm not changing.
Man, we get so much of this is the way it's always been done.
Yeah.
That's a big problem too. That's a huge problem.
It says, even the most experienced IT professionals cannot anticipate. Well, that's what I was thinking of, even the people who have the most experience, sometimes they can't, they don't see it still, because it's just different technology and stuff like that. Did you have something to add, Randy?
No, just the idea of why would we change if we've always done it this way when there's so many opportunities, especially in the IT cyber world, because cyber is changing constantly and it will continue to evolve much faster than we can address it. So we can't afford to have this idea of, well, it's the way we've always done it, so why change? You have to change with it or it's going to swallow us whole.
Right. I agree with that.
Yes.
Okay, Todd, do you have anything else to add to your question or any comment?
Well, when I think about the second part, you talk about the marketplace concept.
Can you kind of describe the marketplace concept, like an overview?
I'm sorry?
Can you kind of like describe what you took to be the marketplace concept, like kind of an overview of how you interpreted that?
Yeah, I mean, I interpreted some basically like a market almost, like where you need, you have to have those individuals and those people who can go in almost as the marketer would. You go in and you impress people. You develop those relationships and you share information and that kind of thing. That's what I found about it.
Okay. And how do you? So where were you going? How do you?
I don't think that they're I think they can, but as of now, they can't based on this trilogy experiment. Because exactly what it said in one of the third challenges is where they lacked and just like we've been talking about, they lacked experienced people. So you don't even you have people who don't have good communication skills. So how are you to market anything and be effective as far as building these relationships when the people that you're in charge of, their communication skills are not very good or not very well. So that's kind of what I got from it.
What do you guys think? Do you think it could alleviate any of those problems that Todd talked about? The marketplace concept?
Yeah, I mean, as far as distributing information equally, as far as like what he mentioned in the marketplace, I feel like it could alleviate some of the problems that he addressed, but still, like we were saying, it's going to be constantly innovating, and there's always going to be something that we don't know.
Yeah, I again think that the liaison, concept is a really good concept there too.
Oh, yeah.
You just have to have somebody who can speak IT and talk to normal people.
Right.
Which sounds like something that would be really simple, but it's not really, because IT it's hard. Like, because Randy said, it's always evolving. You have to have someone who knows both sides, I guess, both processes.
Is willing to learn with it and make mistakes, and I made that mistake, so I'm gonna own it, and now we're going to fix it.
Yeah,
that's key.
Yeah, so many people won't do that.
Because now you're adding in the admitting fault part, and nobody wants to do that. So
Okay, good. Let's go to the next one. So, what specific changes have been attempted in the area of OSINT, post-intelligence reform? Do you think that the value of OSINT has actually been accepted by the IC? We'll just start with that because I think the other questions are going to go more in depth, a little bit longer than. So we'll just start with the open source questions.
Yeah, so I found that some of the changes that have been attempted was creating an open source intelligence agency or office, or contracting out stronger open source intelligence, or OSINT, I guess we can call it for short, services. The DNI report to Congress on the future of the open source intelligence and the possibility of creating a separate open open source intelligence agency. It also talked about the WMD Commission recommended an open source directorate at the CIA. And the last one I found was that would have to be a greater portion, or there would have to be a greater portion of required intelligence that's open, meaning that the intelligence community would have less control over its sources, and many nations can have access to the same open intelligence. This would level, the playing field to an extent, but I think it's still kind of risky because, because of the kind of what we've been talking about all day, this time is kind of exposing that intelligence to other people. So,
What do you guys think about OSINT?
I'm sorry.
What's your take? What's the Randy and Kenneth? What's y'all's take on that?
I think it is good that they would like for it to be more open. But as far, you guys kind of help me out, but as far as it being more open, does that mean it's refers to it being actually more overt, correct? By being more open, right? Does that mean it's more overt?
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of the stuff that you find in the news, the knowledge that you get from the news and things like that. That's what the OSINT.
Right. So, yeah, that's not me.
Randy, what do you?
Nations are built on secrets. I know something that I'm not supposed to know, and I'm going to manipulate you with it because I'm sneaky as hell.
Right.
So there are benefits, and then there are significant challenges with it. So it's a matter of do I really want to level the playing field with other nations?
No.
Really?
No.
Right. Because you don't know what they have.
I would rather work harder to get the information than just have it in front of me and know that other people have it in front of them.
Well, and then you can manipulate nations with the same information. I mean, think about that. You open yourself up to significantly more issues because you're being manipulated with information you think is credible, but everybody has the same information. So what good is it?
I think that's another word in another that's another term that we really have to think about is credibility. Because like you said, I mean, everybody has the same information and you can manipulate it how you want to. So how is that credible?
And what's
exactly
to stop different nations from releasing bad information purposely?
Exactly.
Yes. Nations are built on secrets.
So who is going to be there to facilitate the fact that the information that I'm giving you is even worth anything?
Well, yeah, that's just what we talked about last week with the geospatial intelligence, how people specifically plant things there. So you think that it's true, but it's not true. How do you distinguish what's true and what's not? I don't think that OSINT has been accepted by the intelligence community for that reason, but I also don't think it should be accepted by the intelligence community for that reason.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree totally too.
Okay, so thanks, Todd. We'll move on to Randy's questions. So Lowenthal, I'm sorry, hold on, I lost my spot really quickly. Lowenthal agrees that the 24-hour news cycle is detrimental to the intelligence process because it turns analysis into opinion. Do you agree with that statement? And do you think social media has similar effects?
So I giggled at this question. Yes, turns here. Okay, so depending on the news source, I do agree. International news like BBC, and I can never say it right, Al Jazeera, okay, focus on factual news. And national news like Fox, CNN, MSNBC, they focus on ratings and setting the hook more than they care about actually being factual. For example, there's an article in the late 2000s about a bombing in the Middle East that killed 10 people. U.S. troops, including Staff Sergeant Baker, was stationed less than 2 miles away. Sorry, I'm bumping. And Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC all reported that the event, but neglected to mention that no U.S. forces were injured in it. International news, however, did report complete details about the event. News in America, especially since social media has exploded, has become less and less reliable, and 24-hour news cycle has become more of a reality TV show than facts. So, and that's just one of probably millions of examples of how our 24 news cycle it's warped. We've got to continue to keep you paying attention to get the ratings, and so we've got to continue to set that hook. It sets us up for sensationalizing truth. How is that beneficial for us? Then when we talk about social media, one of the best things that my mom works for a school district in this area, and she teaches teachers how to teach math, right? Well, one of the biggest issues they're seeing in schools right now is the fact that students, kids cannot tell the difference between fact and opinion anymore at all. Social media has completely warped the next generation's opinion or idea of what is truly a fact. If I read it on Facebook, that's fact. No one is willing to do the research to actually go out and verify. I've giggled a few times in our emails from professors saying, "Oh no, where is this idea coming from? Like, where's your cite? You have to cite your source." And so one of my first semesters, I was like, wait, you want me to go into how much detail about this? But it's also taught me that my opinion doesn't matter. We have to go find facts and support those opinions and have a educated opinion versus a socially media educated opinion. So no, I don't think it's beneficial for us here in America because the news is so sensationalized. But there are options where there is 24-hour cycle that it is truly just facts. Here's what's going on. No one's bought into it. It's less political, and huge and emotional.
So a fact-driven 24-hour news cycle actually would help the intelligence process, correct? Because it wouldn't give like a false hope, I guess you'd say, or a certain. Because I know you mentioned the hook, and the hook is basically kind of like those things that you said that Fox is saying, it kind of wants you to think. So that in turn is detrimental to the intelligence, right? Is because it plants that seed in the public's head that's not true, correct?
I would agree with that, but the intelligence community knows first.
Right.
So it is truly taking this information. It depends on who's giving the information. I think that's where my thing is.
Well, here's the problem I have with the 24-hour news and the social media thing as far as intelligence goes. The first thing is bias. All those 24-hour, or I shouldn't say all, most of the 24-hour news outlets in the United States have some sort of bias, right or left. Hardly any of them are moderate. The second problem I have, and it was noted in the text, is that the news is getting the information at the same time as, or even before. They may not be getting the information at the same time as or before, but they're putting it out there before the intelligence community puts it out there. So then we have people who are looking to news media rather than looking to facts.
Mm-hmm.
They've already heard it, and they've already kind of made up their mind about what happened before they actually get the real story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they just run with it.
Exactly. And then they put it on their social media, even if it's not the correct information, because like Randy said, if it's on the internet, it's true.
Yeah.
You know, nobody can distinguish fact from opinion, really. And I think it just limits us. You know, it takes away credibility because
Exactly.
people already know. They know this already, you know, whether it's fact or truth.
Validity, authenticity, all of that. I mean, authenticity, it just changes all of it.
You know, it's funny because like how you mentioned the news from the bombing in the Middle East, Randy. I don't know if I'm sure everyone's taking foundations, but the news media reporting like of looting and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you talk to people today, they're like, oh yeah, you know, all that looting went on and everything. And you're like, well, no. And they even came back and said that it didn't happen. But again, they read it the first time. And then when the news media came back and edited all their, you know, media that they put out during that time, nobody read the edits. They only read what came out the first time.
Well, it kind of goes back to like here recently with the Florence
And the CNN guy.
where he's on his knees over there in the water, and the guy's standing up, and it's in ankle deep water. So I mean, the examples are limitless when it comes to that aspect. It's kind of funny, actually.
Well, and the reason I brought up the bombing is because, you know, my boyfriend was stationed over there, and he told everybody, you cannot watch the news because it's just going to terrify you. It's bad, but it's not that bad. Yeah. So if I'm in this region, you can't watch the news for here. Turn it off because it only spreads fear and panic.
Yeah, and that's what they want to do because they want people to watch it, just like you said. I mean, it's endless, you know. The Weather Channel's even like that, you know. You guys live in Houston or Dallas. Well, they say that there's, you know, a storm in Dallas. Well, yeah, but it's still 100 miles away.
Right.
But anyway, okay, so anybody else have anything to add to that? Or, I mean, I'm sure we could talk about that question all day. Okay, so do you think that the Office of the DNI has been a success or a failure?
Okay, so this question was really difficult for me because I had to actually go find other resources to explain better than the book because of all the acronyms. of what exactly is the DNI and how do they benefit us. And I do agree that it is a success. The fact that, well, depending on the relationship with the president. So one thing I did find was, and even Lowenthal mentions, Clinton's DNI was frustrated because of the lack of access. And then here's Bush, and he's meeting with his DNI for 5 to 6 times a week, sometimes multiple times in a day. So I really do believe that their success or failure depends on the relationship within or with the president.
Can I ask you just one thing that I really couldn't find out? I read that about Clinton and Bush, but did they ever specify if that was before 9/11 or after 9/11 that Bush met with his advisors more often, or was that?
It was post 2001.
Okay.
I'm glad. I mean,
yeah, no, me too, definitely. I found it really surprising that nobody really met with their advisors, before that. But like I said, like Ken said, I'm glad they do now. But okay, that's all. I just wanted to clarify that because I didn't see that. But
did anybody else think that it would have been a failure? That the DNI is a failure? I didn't find that.
No.
I don't think it's a failure either. I think it's been a good thing. I mean, in terms of budget and everything too. The only thing I think that that kind of we should kind of figure out is that, and I think it mentioned it in the text, is that it doesn't really have a backing. Like the DCI was backed by the CIA, which is a good thing and a bad thing because then they don't have they're not partial to any one agency, but
they're neutral.
Yeah, but then they also don't have that backing, so
I can see that aspect, but
that's the only thing I could find that was kind of maybe a drawback.
Yeah, I mean it's a valuable resource for sure, and I like y'all were saying, I can't really find much to say that it's not.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Okay, so we all agree that's pretty much a success. Okay, so the last question is, what do you think are the most critical challenges on the policy intelligence continuum facing future administrations?
So we already kind of talked about this when we were talking about the agenda and the budget, and so I'm not going to go into as much detail because, Kenneth, you hit on this one big time. Our challenges for the future administration are going to come with whose agenda, if they're pulling the right information to support their agenda, or if they're going to, because if there's not a strong relationship there, then I can see too much going wrong too quickly. People aren't on the same page, and that can create more problems. And then the budget, we talked about the budget already. How do you place the right information or the right people, collectors in the right place, and what's it going to cost? Are high value people going to cost more? Intelligence collection is crucial, but at the same time, how do you balance it within the budget? And then, the expectation of information, even if it doesn't exist because of a lack of coverage. Administration can be like, oh, well, why didn't we know this? Well, the information's there, but how do we connect those dots?
Well,
go ahead.
Oh, I'm just saying, I mean, that in future administrations, I think that can be fixed by being a little bit more flexible with our agendas and not just solely focusing on, this is my agenda, this is what I want to push. Oh, well, here's good information that goes against my agenda. Well, okay, we'll handle that later. Okay,
yeah.
Well, tomorrow that big asset's gonna hit, and you're gonna say, okay, well, why didn't we be more flexible in our agenda?
Right.
I think we are kind of not fixing that, but even what we just talked about, how Clinton, he never really met with his advisors. I guess he didn't place a lot of importance on that, but now I think we know that the intelligence community is a valuable asset, and we do kind of need to listen to what they say, regardless of whether we want to hear it or not, because at the end of the day, keeping the nation safe is on, or should be on, all the policymakers' agenda.
Are any of you in Dr. Murag's Global Perspectives class right now, or have taken it?
Yeah,
I took it last semester, yeah.
Okay, so we're in the week where we discuss the intelligence and terrorism in the UK. And I found it fascinating how they've battled terrorism on a whole different level than we have. And I didn't even realize how, like, since the 11th century, they've literally been dealing with constant issues, and how they focus on terrorism. You know, MI5's in charge of just intelligence gathering and counterterrorism, making sure they get all of the correct information. And then there are other groups that are responsible for, you know, criminal activity and stuff like that. But I found it absolutely fascinating how it's evolved compared to ours. Yes, we're catching up fast because we have more resources, and we're willing to, I don't want to say we're willing to throw more people at it, because I don't think that's quite right, but they have significantly more experience. But I can tell that some of the policy and our reform post 9/11 is starting to, oh, you did that work? I think that may actually work. And I think that is a big benefit if we can continue that pattern of what worked for you. Are we going to actually talk about this openly, or are we going to try to, you know, keep it secret, keep it safe?
But it makes you wonder. You said we obviously have more resources, but you know, what makes you wonder, why are we so far behind other nations, and why are all these other nations implementing concepts that actually work, and we're still kind of like stuck in these stone ages?
I think the reason why we're so far behind and why they're more advanced is because, like Randy said, they've dealt with it for so long on their homeland, like in their homeland.
Right.
So, like, what's the name of the Irish, the IRA? Is that what it is?
Yep.
Yeah. So they put up with that like a long time ago, right? So, like, they've had a lot of instances like 9/11, maybe not on that scale, but terrorist attacks happen there every day.
In pubs and malls, it's constant. Yeah.
But at the same time, we should learn from that. You know what I mean? We should
absolutely
see what precautions they're taking.
We're starting to see them.
Some of those here.
They're starting to occur more on our soil. You know, even dating back to the Boston Marathon bombing was huge.
Yeah. I mean, even like mass shootings. You know, that type of thing. It just seems like they have it more figured out than we do. And like Kenneth said, why? Like, why? Like, what are they doing? You would think, you know, maybe we could learn to look to other nations for some guidance, but
perhaps you just pride with the United States with it. Bad, you know. I don't know, but it just kind of seems that way. Maybe we're stubborn.
Yeah, like us. Yeah. But yeah, that class is really eye-opening too. I thought so too, Randy, as far as the way other nations do things and the way that we can learn from them.
That's all I have.
Yeah, that's all I've got too. What about you guys?
That's it.
Okay, good. Well, thank you guys, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, bye.